Today on Goji Center, the analysis platform will bear witness to new predators from another world. A planet that is home to some of the most unique and dangerous creatures in modern cinema, capable of inflicting swift death on their prey or anyone foolish to come across. This, ladies and gents, is Pandora. In this episode, we'll reveal how 10 of these creatures could kill a human being, discussing their anatomy, weapons, and attack methodologies that will bring nothing but pain and doom. Coming up, 10 brutal ways to die in Pandora. If you've seen the first and second Avatar films, you'll quickly recognize some of the animals that we'll be discussing today. However, there might be some that you may or may not have seen for the first time. Some of the creatures discussed in this series will come from Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, such as this one that we're about to discuss. Method number 1, Venom Shower. When we think of fangs, we usually think of those of a snake or tarantulas. The way these usually work is by piercing the victim, injecting venom into its bloodstream. This venom then travels across the body, inflicting severe effects on the victim. With enough dosage, this can potentially kill. The animal we'll discuss today has fangs, but works a little differently. Meet the whip fang crawler. Size 1.5 meters in height and can grow up to 6 meters in length. This predator is usually found along other members of its own species. Intelligent enough to develop its hunting strategy, these animals will creep through the undergrowth of the clouded forest. This way, the animal will use the cover of vegetation to creep up to an unsuspecting victim. For this episode, we'll be using Josh as the test dummy. This dude leaked the next few videos and concept art on our members tab. In fact, he leaked way too much, and now he must be punished. Josh is now placed in a simulated environment where a whipfang crawler lurks about. After detecting its next potential meal, the whipfang crawler will creep up to the victim. This is where this animal earns its name. The unusual fang deploys, and instead of pressing them against the victim, these get out of the way, and venom is then projected with great precision. This venom is technically contact poison that once making contact with the skin will be absorbed. Even a small dose can be fatal. You'll likely fade away, but not before feeling many fangs pierce your body. No, this dude wasn't alone. These hunt in packs. What's left is a dismembered corpse showered in venomous goo. Method number 2, Unpacked. In a world crawling with dangerous creatures during broad daylight, one can imagine how much more dangerous it can get during nighttime. In the first Avatar film, it was implied that staying out here during the night would be practically a death sentence, stating that Jake Sully, despite being in his Avatar form, would not survive the night. These fellas are one of the many reasons why. Known as viper wolves, these animals can reach sizes of up to 6.5 feet in length and up to 3 feet tall. Covered in chitinous armor and wielding a mouthful of large bare teeth, it's pretty safe to say that this animal is enough to kill an unsuspecting human. But we are here to see how. Before we unleash one on Josh, there's a few things we need to cover. One is that these animals are pretty intelligent, pretty knowledgeable of their environment, and leveraging the surrounding vegetation to stay low and ambush prey. These guys would have been aware of your presence for more than 5 miles, giving them enough time to hone in and surround the unsuspecting victim under the cover of darkness. These animals attack as a pack, so Josh here will have to worry about many. If we look closely, we'll find that around 3 of the few viper wolves that attacked Jake Sully aimed at the upper torso with a trajectory towards the head or neck. Remember that Jake Sully here was almost 10 feet in height, and the average human can be a bit more than 4 feet shorter, meaning that these predators could reach these areas with extreme ease, potentially biting through the neck. At the same time, we could be looking at another couple of viper wolves aiming for the extremities, and one going for the nutrient-rich organs such as the liver, unpacking this dude's insides and leaving nothing but a puddle of blood where this man once stood. Method number 3, ground meat. You may recall seeing this animal in the first film. This dire horse may seem harmless at first, with a very familiar resemblance to the horses we are familiar with. But would you believe that these creatures are historically some of the animals with very high human body count? Not that they purposely go out and seek to trample human beings, although they definitely could, but because of the things that their riders would make them do. Throughout antiquity and even in the present day, horses have been domesticated as both beasts of burden and as beasts of war, used for both transporting an individual in the battlefield and used as a means of trampling the opponent. That's right, you may think that the warrior on a horse did most of the killing. Well, you'd be wrong. A horse running into a group of people would hit someone with enough force to knock him unconscious and then proceed to trample him. Running at top speed, a hit human would be sent flying. Now let's imagine this, but with a horse the height of an elephant that weighs up to an estimated 4,500 kilograms or 4 tons. We got this figure by analyzing a 3D model and figuring out the volume and mass. Now, getting hit by a dire horse traveling at top speed would produce a force of more than 1.2 to 2.4 million newtons. That's like getting hit by a pickup truck going at 70 miles per hour. If a dire horse was traveling at this speed and hit the test dummy, almost every single bone of this guy's body would be crushed and body shape turned into a pulp. The skull would fracture in many different locations, so much that the shape of the head would get flattened upon impact. A flimsy corpse would be launched several meters away and then turned into ground meat by the remaining stampede. Method number 4, airborne doom. The
Emmy winning The Traitors is back for an all-new season. Here we go again.
Navi, more specifically the Omaticaya clan and others, were known for domesticating a very unique, dangerous animal known as the Banshee. This creature may not look as big, but again, remember that they are usually depicted alongside Navi natives. Compared to humans, we now have a real threat of massive proportions, with a length of up to 7 meters and a large wingspan of 45 feet. Weapons-wise, this creature had a set of very interesting-looking teeth. At the tip of the mouth, we find what seems to be a hybrid between a tooth and beak, accompanied by similarly shaped teeth in the rest of the maw. Teeth like this, shaped like a hook, are excellent for trapping and gripping, not so much slicing. So, what would happen if the Banshee wrapped its jaws around our test subject? Well, it won't be pretty to say the least. And depending on where these teeth pierce, we may be looking at a slow, agonizing death for the victim. For the purposes of this simulation, we'll speculate as to how exactly a Banshee would come about a mouthful of human. If flying in this trajectory with its mouth open wide, the teeth would actually completely miss the heart. This sounds good, but it isn't. That just means lots more pain the person would have to endure before they black out. These teeth, each measuring more than 6 inches, would pierce deep enough to puncture the lungs, collapsing these or making them fill up with blood. The beak would then pierce the spinal cord, sever it, and cause instant paralysis. So, even if the Banshee let go of this guy, he's just as good as dead anyways. In this specific scenario where the teeth missed the heart, the cause of death would have been shock from blood loss or suffocation if the Banshee decides to swallow this guy whole. Now, it's important to mention that these animals are omnivores. They won't exclusively go out looking for meat all the time. But when opportunity presents, these guys would most definitely take it. The next animal in this list won't actively hunt humans down. In fact, they mind their own business, for the most part. Mess with them, however, and getting trampled by a dire horse won't sound too bad anymore. Number 5, wedged. That's what happens when a foreign object makes its way into another object, splitting it into 2 parts. So what could possibly do that in this situation? Well, there are many that could, but not many could do it better than the Sturm Beast. These animals are pretty big by our standards. These would take the same ecological role as a buffalo, more or less, and behave very similarly. Very territorial, and will form up a mass attack against any predator in the form of a stampede. These aren't troublemakers, so we'll probably have to encourage the Storm Beast to attack the test subject and see what happens. Today we'll be focusing on these 2 pieces of hardware mounted on this animal's skull. Because this guy is around 23 feet in height, it is likely that the one that will make contact with an average-sized human would be the bottom spike on the lower jaw, depending on the posture, of course. This makes whatever force this animal has exponentially worse. Concentrated into this small area, this means that if a human gets caught in the way of this small spike, the body would literally begin to split. Breaking through the skin, muscle, and ribcage, the ripping motion would quite literally burst open all major arteries, which would make it seem like this fella exploded in a mist of blood. Surprisingly, due to the likelihood of the spike missing the head completely, the victim would have a few seconds of horror looking down as his own chest ripped open. Number 6, Force Shutdown. We've reached the halfway point of this episode, and from here on out, the weapons deployed by these creatures will be, unusual to say the least. The perfect example will be this animal, the Slinth. From the side, this animal doesn't really look like anything special by Pandora's standards. It's only when we begin to understand what's going on under the hood when things begin to look interesting. These armored plates, when opened, will reveal 2 fangs on each side of the face. These will inject the victim with a neurotoxin which, according to the book The World of Avatar, will allow this animal to eat its victim alive. Now, we aren't exactly sure how this specific neurotoxin works, but we can speculate. Neurotoxins are harmful substances that affect the nervous system, which is how the brain communicates with the body. When a neurotoxin enters the body, it can disrupt normal nerve functions, causing symptoms like pain, paralysis, and death. Animals such as snakes, spiders, cone snails, scorpions, and jellyfish all use a form of neurotoxin for defense and for hunting prey. We'd like to imagine that an animal this big injecting such a dose to a human would cause all 3. So, once struck, our test dummy will seem to suffer from paralysis quite quickly, allowing the Slinth to feast on a living meal. Running away from these isn't an option unless you have slower friends alongside you. These animals are said to be extremely fast on their feet, but the strike itself may not be as fast as the one inflicted by the next predator. Number 7, Slingshot. One may say that so far the animals we have discussed are actually quite nice looking, unique and colorful, very fitting to the beautiful flora that surrounds them in Pandora. This animal? Not so much. This one is pure hellspawn. Meet the Slinger. At almost 8 feet in height, it seems as if this animal is the perfect size to dispatch a human being. And trust us, this is unlike anything you've seen before. What you're looking at right now is actually 2 separate animals coexisting in symbiosis. This head is actually the child of the parent, which would be the body. This animal crawls the jungles of Pandora looking for what to eat next. Once it detects something, it will do something bizarre, cocking its head back like when you pull the hammer back on a revolver. Once the target is in sight, the neck will shoot forward and launch the head, that being the child, into the prey. In this case, if a human was unlucky enough to be locked in by the Slinger, the hungry mom would throw her baby right at its next meal, impaling the victim. This head is venomous, so if for whatever reason it fails to hit a vital organ, the venom would kick in and do the work. The parent segment once again attaches to the child via an internal kuru, that way they could both eat. After some time, the child will detach from the parent, metamorphose into another Slinger, leaving the parent to starve to death. Yeah, we weren't kidding when we said these things are going to get pretty weird. Number 8, Sledgehammer.
That client review was brutal.
We're gonna be underwater for weeks.
I'm already so pruny.
Imagine running through Pandora's lush jungles, and then you begin to hear some loud bellowing sounds and the ground shake. In the distance, you begin to hear trees sway violently, and the ground shakes harder. You turn around and you see this, or these, actually. At this point, you'll only have around a few seconds to live, so might as well know what killed you. This is known as a hammerhead titanothere, measuring up to 36 feet in length. These animals are considerably much larger than Earth's elephants and the larger ceratopsians like Triceratops. As you may have already guessed, the tool that we'll analyze today is the hammer. This part of the head is made of solid ossified bone, once a bit flexible in its younger years, but rock solid once mature. These animals, when striking, will sometimes sway side to side. It's this maneuver that we'll study, because we already know what would happen if hit by a charging animal. Getting hit by this one will be more or less similar. A more interesting scenario would be what would happen if you got caught between the swinging motion of 2 titanotheres. Assuming you didn't stand your ground like Jake Sully here and decided to run for it, chances are that the Titanotheres would catch up, swinging their heads sideways, aiming to land a hit. In our very special scenario, our test dummy got caught between two sledgehammers. The result being a crushed upper torso pressed so thin that the corpse is unrecognizable. This isn't about what you feel when you die. This is about what's left of you. More often than not, cleaning up after someone that got murked by a hammerhead will require a shovel. Cleanup crew will not be needed for the next creature, though. Number 9, the Last Shadow. You may initially think that a wild banshee is the thing to look out for in the sky, but something even the banshees themselves look out for is this fella, the Leonopteryx. Known as Taruk or Last Shadow in Navi, this monster earns its name by attacking from above, using its talons and great momentum to inflict fatal damage to banshees and other large prey. Now let's imagine for a moment that this was done to a human. Looking closely at the Leonopteryx, we find that these claws are in the optimal shape for piercing and impaling a victim. Not so much short and hooked, but rather long and curved to help this animal impale while coming down on the prey. In this simulation, we'll find out what happens if Taruk decides that a small human is worth its while. To make this more believable, we'll pretend that this human stole an egg. It is said that one of these animals was caught eating a Navi individual for the same reason. Once Taruk sets its eyes on the thief, it will begin to descend. Not at full speed, lest it may inflict damage on itself. Once the human detects the shadow, it will be too late. The Leonopteryx already has its sights locked in, and the talon pierces violently through the torso of the victim. Because its head was not pierced, this dude will be alive shortly after the claw pierces, but likely die due to the hard impact on the floor. We'd like to think that if Taruk ever does kill humans in the lore of Pandora, it's likely in this fashion. Flying low only to catch them with its maw is too risky. So, landing in this fashion seems like the plausible way to go. The test subject's fate in the next section will be all teeth and terror. The Leonopteryx may be the apex predator in the air, but there are not many who can claim that title from this next creature, the Thanator. This massive predator runs on 6 legs and can measure more than 18 feet in length. Its most useful weapons, and the ones to inflict the killing blow, are those fangs that stick out the front of its maw. Equipped with many other sharp teeth and capable of ripping through thick branches with its teeth and claws, it's not hard to imagine what quick work it will do with a human test subject. The Thanator's teeth are excellent for piercing and gripping, each tooth slightly curved and pointed with a very sharp tip. Not necessarily good for cutting like those of an Allosaurus or a Komodo dragon. Instead, to rip our human test subject, it will rely on the speed in which it shakes a victim. Once those teeth pierce the victim's body, it would be swung violently. The teeth would have severed the spine, the only part of the skeleton fastening the upper torso in one piece. Once severed, the rest of the body will begin to rip. This, believe it or not, won't kill immediately, unless the test subject was bit on the head. Despite not being able to cling on to life for very long, the victim would still be conscious for a short time as it makes its way down the animal's throat.